that this is going to be a year of big books. I've just moved this little side table here because I think I better put these books aside. Okay, that's much better. So I've got my tea here. I also have my very recent purchase, a little lamp from Zara, which I absolutely adore. I keep it on my bookshelf most of the time, but sometimes it travels with me in between the rooms of my house. And also I have my trusted notebook because today we're talking about reading plans for 2026. I've used this notebook in 2025 and I still have about 40% blank space left and I'm determined to use it. I don't know about you, but I suffer from this condition where I struggle to get to the end of my notebooks. I am so excited usually about starting a new notebook that I don't always fill out all the pages, which is really, really bad. So I'm trying to stop it. So even though I do have a similar spare notebook kept for my reading notes, I am continuing with this one. I'll show you in a second how I set it up. But also I have in front of me a book on writers, which I talked about in my video on Christmas gift ideas. I gifted this book to myself. It's a used copy, but it is in excellent condition. And this book helped me find a couple of new authors that I want to explore in 2026 that I have never heard about before. So I want to refer to this book in this video, and this is why it's in front of me. This year I am approaching my reading plans a little bit differently than last year. I never set myself any numerical goals, but still I do like to have some kind of an idea of where I want to go with my reading, where I want to focus, and also which authors I want to discover. So what I did was, at the end of my reading notebook, just like last year, I had my priority TBR for 2025. This year, my 2026 list looks a little bit differently because I focused on classics. With classics, I want to be a little bit more deliberate in how I approach them. With contemporary fiction, I am much more relaxed and I tend to be swayed by not so much new releases, but mainly my mood. But for example, also what I'm reading currently is Intermezzo by Sally Rooney. I wasn't going to read it, but my friend has just finished it and she offered to lend it. So I said, yes, why not? And this kind of illustrates how your TBR can be very easily hijacked by what's happening around you. And then for non-fiction, I have literally put 2 titles on my list because I want to be realistic. I know if I haven't read much non-fiction last year, it is highly unlikely I will suddenly be pulled into that direction, although you never know. Very, very high on my priority lists when it comes to classics is Kristin, Lavransdatter by Sigrid Undset. This was recommended by one of you wonderful people to me after I read The Thornbirds, and I was asking for some great saga recommendations. As soon as I looked it up following your very kind recommendation, I knew I was going to love it. Apparently, this is one of the greatest novels of 20th century Europe, and it did earn Undset the Nobel Prize in 1928. This is actually a trilogy, which I have in this gorgeous Penguin Classics Deluxe edition. and all 3 volumes here have been put into one book. We follow Kristin, the main protagonist, from childhood to very old age. This is set in 14th century Norway, by the way. But apparently this book is not romanticizing the Middle Ages at all. Instead, it is supposed to be a deep exploration of Kristin's inner life, who is supposed to be this very much strong-willed and passionate human being who makes certain decisions that will shape her life. I can't wait to start reading it, and I think I will start reading it as soon as I finish my other big classic that I have started. By reading, I mean listening on Audible, because I don't have a paper copy yet. It is coming in the post as we speak, and that is David Copperfield by Charles Dickens. I have always said 2026 will be my Dickens year, and I do have his great expectations. I also have his A Tale of Two Cities, but I wanted to start with David Copperfield because later in the year I want to read... Oops, I brought the wrong book. I want to read Barbara Kingsolver Demon Copperhead. Instead, I brought her the Poisonwood Bible. 1 second. Let's try this again, shall we? So, yes, because I want to read this later in the year, I thought I'd better read David Copperfield first. And also another reason why, well, 2 more reasons why I wanted to read David Copperfield first. One is, after reading Jane Austen and Charlotte Brontë in December, I found myself craving a book with a strong and colorful male protagonist for a change. So I thought that would fit the bill very nicely. And also, added bonus, this book on Audible is narrated by Richard Armitage, and if you saw my video on The Grapes of Wrath, you will know that I absolutely adored Richard Armitage's narration of The Grapes of Wrath, which was pure perfection. And so I'm planning to do the same with David Copperfield as well. Listen to it on Audible a little bit and then intertwine it with reading a paper copy. I plan to read David Copperfield in small doses, so it will probably take me quite a bit of time to finish that book, but I want to read it in small doses because I want to follow how it was designed to be read in first place. So in short episodes, which would have been published at the time in newspapers or periodicals, whatever they were called. And then the next 2 also big books on my priority classics lists are The Tenant of Wildfell Hall by Anne Brontë. This time I read Wuthering Heights by Emily Brontë and Jane Eyre by Charlotte Brontë, and so of course now I have to read Anne as well. You've been recommending it to me after I talked about Jane Eyre in one of my recent videos. I have super high hopes for this book, and yes, I count it as a big book because it's just 8 pages short of 500, and anything from 500 onwards I count as a big book. And then my final classic that will be priority for me is Wives and Daughters by Elizabeth Gaskell. I thought I was going to read her North and South, but at the last minute I changed my mind, having watched Jennifer Jelinkova's video who read all of Gaskell, and this is her favorite novel, so I'm just going to trust her on this. No pressure, Jennifer. Let's see what's next. Oh, by the way, because all of these 4 books are quite big, I deliberately was very conservative in terms of the number of the books that I wanted to choose. But I do have a wish list, or a B list if you like, because if I do manage to finish these 4 big classics and I still have time this year to read a couple more big classics, then on my backup list I have Anna Karenina, Count of Monte Cristo, again one that's been recommended by you several times, Dr. Zhivago, and the Makioka sisters as well. But the one I want to talk about a little bit more for a minute is Orhan Pamuk, a Turkish writer whom I've never heard about before. I only discovered him when I was working in a local bookstore in December. I enjoyed, of course, quite a significant discount, and I did purchase several new books, mostly classics. Let me know if you would like an updated tour of my bookshelf, because especially the bookshelf that has classics on them has grown quite a bit. Anyway, so this book was published in 2002. So actually, I am not sure if technically we should be calling it a classic, because it's still a very young book, but it was published by Everyman's Library in their usual classic edition. So we're talking about it here in the classic section. Anyway, I do want to read Snow. However, having done more research, I understand that Snow is a little bit difficult to read. And actually, on that note, in 2026, I really wanted to read Middlemarch by George Eliot, but I set that book aside for next year because I feel like my classics reading muscle still needs a little bit more exercise. Similar to this book, because it's apparently a little bit difficult to read, I have included on my wishlist TBR his other book titled Strangeness in My Mind, which has almost 800 pages. So again, a big book. Let me know if you've read either Snow or Strangeness in My Mind, and whether it is the right decision to postpone reading Snow and read the other book first. I definitely also want to make time in 2026 for my already favorite authors, and that would be Daphne du Maurier, of course. I have her, apart from My Cousin Rachel and Rebecca, 3 other books, and I am drawn to Frenchman's Creek quite a bit, weirdly. I don't know why. I also have had Jamaica in, but I also have had The Glass Blowers, which sounds very intriguing, and again, this is one recommended by one of you wonderful people. This is based on du Maurier's own family history, because her predecessors were glassblowers. So that sounds super interesting, doesn't it? And then, of course, I'm gonna read more Josephine Tey. You know that I loved her. The Franchise Affair, and Brat Farah is another book that I borrowed from a library once, but it was in a different edition and I couldn't really read the font. I love these new crime classics edition published by Penguin, which come in this bright green cover. They have a thought through layout because they're so comfortable to hold. They've got big letters. They feel so portable and light, easy to open. I can take this book with me anywhere, and of course I am excited about reading more Josephine Tey. And the third author is, of course, John Steinbeck. I have read Of Mice and Men and also The Grapes of Wrath, so naturally now it's time to read East of Eden. Again, a big book, so you can see a trend here. Now, in terms of new classic authors I want to discover, I have put down 2 names that I definitely want to read this year. One of them is Magda Szabó, a Hungarian writer, and what apparently is her most popular novel in Hungary, titled Abigail. This was published in 1970, and this is a coming-of-age story. We follow it through the eyes of a young girl, and this is set in 1943, so definitely wartime plays a huge part in this. So there is that added tension, but also that blend that I like of a story of individual lives, but interconnected with political and historical events. And the other one is, and I forgot to get the book down, At this rate, I won't have to do any additional exercise today. Anyway, so the second author I definitely want to read this year is Anton Chekhov, a Russian playwright. In 2025, I read Ibsen, a Norwegian playwright. I enjoyed him a lot. I still have a couple of his plays on my shelf to read. I also read Tennessee Williams, and I will read more of him at some point as well. But I want to focus on Anton Chekhov this year, and I have this Penguins collection of his plays, which includes Ivanov, the Seagull, Uncle, Vanya, Three Sisters, and The Cherry Orchard. If you have any advice on which play to read first, let me know. I'm thinking either Three Sisters or The Seagull. So these two classic authors I am definitely reading this year. I also have a wish list that includes Virginia Woolf and also Fitzgerald's The Great Gatsby, which I haven't read yet, and maybe Kafka and maybe Thomas Mann. I have had lots of luck with German writers. If I have time, I might read Thomas Mann's Death in Venice, but also there are a couple of other stories or novellas in this collection. They titled Tristan and Tonio Kroger. But before we finish talking about new authors, I have a couple more that I have discovered in this wonderful book about writers. I was just going through this book, and this is why it's so great to have a book like this in your collection. Nawal El-Saadawi was an Egyptian writer, physician, feminist, activist renowned for speaking out against gender oppression and social injustice, especially in the Arab world. And the one book that she is especially known for is titled Woman at Point Zero, which tells the story of Firdaus, a woman on death row for killing her pimp. Apparently a powerful statement about resistance and about self-determination, and I definitely want to read it. And the other author I want to read this year is Aphra Behn, again, someone I have never heard of before, although you probably have if you had any kind of English literature formal education, because she was an English 17th century playwright, poet, and also novelist. And she is best known for her plays, but also for her novel titled Oroonoko. This was published in 1688, and it is considered one of the first English novels. Even though Daniel Defoe's Robinson Crusoe became much more famous later and kind of stole this title. So yes, I am intrigued. I did mention I've got two titles under my non-fiction, and one is Jean de Dion. I have this beautiful Everyman's Library edition, which has 3 pieces of her work, including the one that I was interested in most, which was The Year of Magical Thinking. We also have here Blue Nights, South and West, and Let Me Tell You What I Mean. So excited about this one. And then, in the spirit of me trying to read more Polish literature, when I was in Poland last time, I picked up Ryszard Kapuściński Jeszcze Dzień Życia, which is translated into English, and its English title is Another Day of Life. Kapuściński was a Polish journalist who was one of the most influential literary reporters of 20th century. And he spent decades in places like Latin America, Asia, Africa, usually in places where there was some kind of conflict or revolution, some kind of upheaval. And what really sets him apart is that he refused to separate journalism from literature. So what we have with his works is that blend of reportage and also philosophy and personal reflection reflections and sometimes anthropology as well. He has produced many well-known pieces of work, and this particular book, Another Day of Life, is Kapuściński's account of Angola in 1975, just before its independence from Portugal and the outbreak of the Civil War. For contemporary fiction, like I said, I'm going to give myself lots of freedom, but in terms of the tried and tested authors, I definitely want to read more. Bernhard Schlink, I have acquired his 4 books somehow after reading Olga last year, which I loved and which was my best contemporary novel I read last year. So I have his The Reader, for which he is probably most known. The Granddaughter, which I'm going to read next. I also have The Woman on the Stairs, which I'm quite interested in actually. And then I have a set of his short stories, which I didn't know it was a collection of short stories. I picked it up very quickly in the charity store. As soon as I saw Bernhard Schlink, I didn't care what book it was. It cost £1, so of course I was going to buy it. And then the other favorite author I want to read more of is Sarah Hall. At some point I will read her latest release titled Hound, but I'm waiting until it's published as a paperback. But what I do have by her is Burnt Code. I also have a short story collection by her, but I want to read her novel next, and this happened to be on the shelves of, again, the bookstore where I was working, so I picked it up and I'll be reading this year. And of course I'll be continuing with sagas because, again, after loving The Thornbirds, I want to read more sagas, and on your recommendation I'm not sure if I will have time to do this in 2026. I'm hoping to, because I'm very excited about this title, but I want to read The Eighth Life by Nino Haratischvili. I did borrow the English translation of that book from the library, and it's a huge book. Tiny little letters which I wouldn't be able to read. So unless I want to read it on my e-reader, which I don't really want to do with this book, I was forced to seek another solution. And my solution was to read the Polish translation of this book, which luckily has been printed in not 1 but 2 volumes. So they're still big books, but what you get is gorgeously large letters. Look at this. I did do some research about the translation. It is supposed to be very good. So I am good to go with this one. And the other saga I want to read that was also recommended by you is the Cazalet Chronicles by Elizabeth Jane Howard. I have the first book in the series, which is called The Light Years. Also high on my list is Gilead by Merlin Robinson. I also have some leftover titles from 2025 that I didn't get to, so Homegoing by Ya Gyasi. Also, The Widow Queen by Elżbieta Herezińska. I really want to read this book, but somehow I didn't get around to it last year. I definitely need to read it this year and want to read it this year. This is an original Polish version of the book, which I'll show you the English version of it on the screen. And also, I want to read more by Olga Tokarczuk. I have had for ages this book by her, which is called Dom Dzienny, Dom Nocny. I was so happy to see that it was finally translated. I think probably quite recently, because I saw it in my local bookstore. I think the title of it in English is House of Day, House of Night. Talking about Polish writers, I forgot to mention this guy, Stefan Żeromski, whom I probably should have mentioned when I was talking about classics, because this is a Polish classic. Żeromski was one of Poland's most important modern writers, and he was also often called the conscience of Polish literature, because he often wrote about national identity and social injustice. If you're wondering why you're looking at a different screen, it's because my camera died. It is also getting dark, as you can see, and the light may not be very good. Apologies for that. But I believe I was talking about The Faithful River by Stefan Żeromski. So just to give you an idea what this book is about, this book was published in 1912, but it is set in 1863, just after the January uprising against the Russian rule in the partition Poland. And we follow a young woman named Salomea who shelters this injured soldier in her family manor, which is set by a river, hence the title, The Faithful River. This is described as an excellent portrayal of loyalty, sacrifice, and moral endurance. And by the way, what I have here, I think is a very old edition. Oh my goodness. This book was published in 1962. You can tell it's got very yellow pages. I do have more Polish classics because I did a bit of a haul during the last trip in Poland, and let me know if you would like a separate video on that, because actually, come to think of it, most of the books that I have purchased have been translated into English. This is why you could read them too if you were interested. You don't have to. I want to revisit Polish literature because you must feel the same way with any English literature that you were made to read while in school. It's a very, very different perspective that one has when one is forced to read something as a child, or at least at a very young age, to maybe the perspective of reading something out of your own will when you are fully cooked, mature adult. So these are my fairly loose reading plans for 2026. Let me know what you are going to read this year and which titles you have prioritized and why. What can I say? Bring on 2026. I'm ready. Thank you very much for watching, and I'll see you next Friday as always. Bye for now.